Abby, a 28-year-old designer from Los Angeles, didn't expect a chance moment with his childhood friend Trey to turn their lives around. Trey, a straight man with the perfect fiancée, suddenly found himself in his arms after one look. But when Trey's fiancée found out the truth, the secret affair exploded into scandal, lies, and a shocking confession that Abby never saw coming. Abby Sanders, a 28-year-old interior designer with a sharp eye and an even sharper wit, had always seen his Santa Monica apartment as his fortress. Tucked away in a sleek building just blocks from the ocean, it was the one place where he could drop the polished exterior he wore for clients and just be. The hum of LA traffic outside faded into a distant buzz, drowned out by the vinyl records he'd spin on lazy nights, or the clink of a beer bottle against his coffee table. It was his space, his rules, until Trey Cole crashed back into his life. Trey had been Abby's shadow since they were kids growing up in the sprawl of Orange County. The guy was a walking cliché of charm, tousled dark hair, a grin that could disarm anyone, and a knack for making even the dullest moments feel electric. They bonded over skateboards and late-night Taco Bell runs, the kind of friendship that didn't need words to hold it together. Trey was straight as a freeway, or so Abby had always assumed, engaged to Caitlin, his picture-perfect fiancée, for the past year. Abby had watched their relationship from the sidelines, a casual observer to their Instagram-filtered life. That Friday night, though, Trey showed up unannounced. Abby had just kicked off his boots after a brutal day of client meetings when the buzzer rang. "Yo, man, it's me." Trey's voice crackled through the intercom, rougher than usual. "Caitlin and I had a blowout. Can I crash here?" Abby didn't hesitate. Trey had crashed on his couch before, usually after too many drinks or a last-minute gig. "Doors open," he called back, already cracking a cold one from the fridge. They settled into the night easy enough. Trey sprawled across the couch, his worn-out Vans dangling off the armrest, while Abby leaned against the counter, nursing his beer. They swapped stories about work, Trey's latest gig as a freelance photographer, Abby's nightmare client who wanted a minimalist jungle vibe in a 600-square-foot condo. The laughter came fast, the kind that reminded Abby why they'd stayed tight all these years. But something was off. Trey's usual swagger felt forced, his hazel eyes darting to the floor too often. "She thinks I'm cheating," he muttered at one point, staring at the bottle in his hand. Abby raised an eyebrow. "Are you?" Trey snorted. "Nah, man. You know me." And that was that, or so Abby thought. By 11 p.m., exhaustion hit him like a truck. "I'm gonna shower," he said, clapping Trey on the shoulder as he headed down the hall. The hot water was a reset button, washing away the day's grind. He stepped out, towels slung low around his hips, the cool air of his bedroom prickling his skin. He was halfway to his dresser when the door swung open. Trey stood there, frozen mid-step, hands still on the knob. His eyes locked onto Abby, not with the awkward flinch of a guy caught off guard, but with something heavier, sharper. Time stretched, the silence roaring in Abby's ears. Water dripped from his hair onto the hardwood, each plink a countdown to something he couldn't name. "Abby." Trey started, his voice low, rough, like he was testing the word. He didn't look away. He should have looked away, muttered a "Shit, sorry," and bolted. But he didn't. Abby's grip tightened on the towel, his pulse hammering. He wasn't shy, years of gym time had carved his frame into something he was damn proud of, but this was different. Trey's gaze wasn't just curiosity, it was a question, a dare, a crack in the wall they'd built over decades. "What the hell, man?" Abby finally said, forcing a laugh that came out too tight. Trey blinked, like he'd snapped out of a trance, but his feet didn't move. I thought you were still in the shower," he stammered, though the lie hung thin between them. His eyes flicked down Abby's chest, then back up, quick but unmistakable. Abby's throat went dry. "You gonna stand there all night?" he shot back, stepping toward the dresser, trying to shake the weight of the moment. Trey cleared his throat, finally stepping back. "Sorry, dude," he mumbled, the door clicking shut behind him. But that pause, that split-second hesitation, lingered like smoke in the air. Alone again, Abby exhaled hard, his reflection staring back from the mirror. Trey wasn't just his straight best friend crashing for the night anymore. He was something else now, something dangerous. And for the first time in years, Abby wasn't sure he wanted to push it away. The air in Abby Sanders' Santa Monica apartment didn't feel the same after that night. The echo of Trey's footsteps retreating from the bedroom door lingered like a ghost, and Abby couldn't shake it. He'd crashed on the couch plenty of times before, sprawled out, snoring through a hangover, but this was different. That look in Trey's eyes, the way it pinned him in place, wasn't something you just brush off with a laugh and a "no homo." Abby tossed his towel aside, yanked on a pair of sweats, and tried to tell himself he was reading too much into it. Trey was straight. Engaged. End of story. Morning came too fast. Abby shuffled into the kitchen, the smell of coffee cutting through the haze of a restless night. Trey was already up, perched on a stool at the counter, scrolling through his phone. His hair was a mess, his hoodie rumpled, but he looked too awake for a guy who'd supposedly fought with his fiancée hours ago. "Sleep okay?" Abby asked, keeping his tone casual as he poured a mug. Trey glanced up, his hazel eyes catching the light. "Yeah, man. Couch is comfier than I remembered." A smirk tugged at his lips, but it didn't reach his gaze. Abby nodded, sipping his coffee, waiting for Trey to say he was heading out. He didn't. Instead, Trey stuck around. Hours bled into the afternoon. Takeout boxes piled up, a Lakers game blared on the TV, and their usual banter filled the space. But every laugh felt like it was dodging something heavier. Trey's knee brushed Abby's when they shifted on the couch, and neither of them pulled away. It was small, stupid even, but Abby's skin buzzed where they touched. He cursed himself for noticing. By dusk, the room glowed orange from the LA sunset, and Trey still hadn't grabbed his keys. "You good to drive?" Abby asked, half hoping he'd leave, half dreading it. Trey shrugged. "Not really. Mind if I crash one more night?" Abby's gut said no, but his mouth said, "Sure." That night the tension snapped. They were on the couch again, a couple beers deep, the TV droning some late-night rerun. Trey's leg pressed against Abby's, deliberate this time, and the air thickened. Abby turned to crack a joke, diffuse it, but Trey was already looking at him, too close, too steady. "What's up with you?" Abby asked, voice low. Trey's Adam's apple bobbed. "I don't know, man," he muttered, but his hand moved, slow and shaky, resting on Abby's thigh. Time froze. Abby's pulse roared in his ears, every nerve screaming to pull back. He didn't. Then Trey kissed him. It was clumsy at first, a hesitant press of lips, like he was testing the edge of a cliff. Abby's brain short-circuited. Trey's engaged, he's straight, this is insane, but his body didn't care. He kissed back, hard, one hand gripping Trey's hoodie, the other sliding up his neck. The dam broke. Trey's fingers dug into Abby's side, pulling him closer, and the kiss turned hungry, desperate, like they'd both been holding their breath for years. When they broke apart, chest heaving, Trey's eyes were wild. "I'm not gay," he rasped, like he needed to say it out loud. Abby smirked, breathless. "Yeah, okay." But Trey didn't leave. The next night, he was back, knocking on Abby's door after dark, no excuse, just a look that said he couldn't stay away. They didn't talk about it. No Caitlin, no labels, no tomorrow. It was just them, tangled up in the dark, hands and mouths and heat that drowned out the world. Abby knew it was a fuse burning toward a bomb. Trey's phone buzzed constantly, missed calls, texts he ignored, and Abby caught the guilt flickering in his eyes when he thought he wasn't looking. "She's gonna kill me if she finds out," Trey muttered once, sprawled across Abby's bed, staring at the ceiling. Abby propped himself on an elbow, tracing the ink on Trey's arm. "Then why were you here?" Trey didn't answer, just pulled him down again. It went on like that, stolen nights, locked doors, the city humming outside while they unraveled inside. Abby told himself he could handle it, that it was just physical, a glitch in their friendship. But the way Trey's hands lingered, the way his voice cracked when he whispered Abby's name, said otherwise. He wasn't just some straight guy experimenting, he was in it, deep, and Abby was the current dragging him under. Every touch felt like a confession Trey couldn't voice, and every goodbye felt like a lie. Abby knew it couldn't last. Caitlin wasn't stupid, she'd noticed Trey's excuses, the late nights, the distance. And when she did, this house of cards would collapse. But as Trey's lips brushed his collarbone in the dark, Abby didn't care. Not yet. For the first time in years, he felt alive, raw, reckless, and tethered to someone who was supposed to be off limits. Trey wasn't his to keep, but damn if he didn't want to try. Abby Sanders had never been good at walking away from trouble. Growing up in Orange County, he'd scrapped with bullies, crashed skateboards into curbs, and once hotwired a golf cart just to see if he could. But this thing with Trey Cole, was a different kind of reckless. It wasn't just the late-night hookups in his Santa Monica apartment, the way Trey's hands mapped his skin like he was memorizing it. It was the way it felt right, even when it was so damn wrong. Trey was engaged. Straight, supposedly. And yet, here they were, 3 weeks deep into something neither of them could name. The cracks were showing, though. Trey's phone buzzed more than it used to, ignored calls from Caitlin stacking up like unpaid bills. He'd swiped them away, tossed the phone face down on Abby's coffee table, and dived back into him like nothing else mattered. But Abby saw it, the twitch in Trey's jaw, the way his fingers drummed restlessly against his thigh. "She's asking where I've been," Trey said one night, sprawled on the couch, a beer dangling from his hand. Abby leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "What did you tell her?" Trey smirked, but it was hollow. "Work. Gigs. The usual." Abby didn't push. He didn't want to hear the truth, or the lie. It was a Tuesday when the bomb dropped. Abby was sketching a client's loft layout, the hum of LA traffic filtering through his open window, when his phone lit up. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him swipe. "Abby?" The voice was sharp, trembling, like a wire about to snap. "It's Caitlin." His stomach plummeted. He'd met her a handful of times, blonde, polished, the kind of girl who posted yoga selfies and called Trey babe in public. "What's up?" he managed, keeping it cool. Her laugh was a jagged edge. "Don't play dumb. I know what you're doing with him." The line crackled with her fury. Abby's grip tightened on the phone, his mind racing. "Caitlin, She cut him off. "I found the texts. Meet me tonight. Miss you. You think I'm stupid?" His chest seized. He'd been careful, they'd been careful, but not enough. "You're ruining my life," she spat. "And when I tell everyone what a sick game you're playing, you're done." The call ended with a click, leaving Abby staring at the screen, her words ringing in his ears. Trey showed up an hour later, eyes stormy, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "She knows," he said, pacing the living room like a caged animal. Abby stood by the couch, arms crossed, trying to keep his voice steady. "What did she say?" Trey dragged a hand through his hair. "She's got screenshots. Threatened to send them to my folks, my clients, everyone." He stopped, meeting Abby's gaze, and the panic there hit like a punch. "She's losing it, man." Abby's jaw tightened. "What else?" Trey exhaled hard, like the air was being squeezed out of him. "She's pregnant." The room tilted. Abby blinked, the words sinking in slow and heavy. "Pregnant?" he echoed, voice flat. Trey nodded, staring at the floor. "Found out last week. She thinks I've been with you instead of her because of it." Abby's mind spun. A kid. Caitlin. Trey's life snapping back into a lane he couldn't escape. "You're gonna be a dad," he said, testing the weight of it. Trey's laugh was bitter. "Yeah. Maybe." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Abby's chest ached, not just from the news, but from the way Trey wouldn't look at him. "So what now?" he asked, stepping closer. Trey's shoulders slumped. "I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm doing anymore." His voice cracked, and for the first time, Abby saw him unraveling, not the cocky photographer with the easy grin, but a guy drowning in his own mess. "You going back to her?" Abby pressed, hating how much he needed the answer. Trey's eyes flicked up, dark and torn. "I don't know who I am without her." That hit harder than it should have. Abby stepped back, the space between them suddenly a canyon. He'd been a fool to think this was anything more than a detour for Trey, a fling to burn off steam before he ran back to his real life. "Then figure it out," Abby said, voice low, turning to grab his beer from the counter. He didn't look back, but he felt Trey's stare, heavy and pleading. "Abby, Trey started, but the words died. The door clicked shut behind him minutes later, leaving Abby alone with the hum of the city and a truth he couldn't dodge. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was a wrecking ball, and it was swinging straight for them both. 3100. Part 4 Reckoning. Abby Sanders had always prided himself on keeping his cool. Years of navigating LA's cutthroat design scene, schmoozing clients, dodging diva tantrums, and turning shoebox condos into magazine spreads, had taught him how to roll with the punches. But nothing could have prepped him for the fallout of Trey Cole. That phone call from Caitlin had been the first crack. What came next was the earthquake. 3 days after Trey dropped the pregnancy bomb and bolted, Abby's world started crumbling, and it wasn't quiet. He was mid-sketch, pencil scratching out a sleek kitchen layout, when his phone buzzed. Not a call this time, a flood of notifications. Instagram tags, texts, emails. His heart sank as he swiped. Caitlin hadn't just threatened to expose them, she'd done it. Screenshots of their texts lit up her story. "Meet me tonight, Abby. Can't stop thinking about you." She'd captioned it with venom. "Meet my fiancé's side piece. Ladies, lock up your men." The post was public, tagged with his handle, at Abby Sanders Designs, and it was spreading like wildfire. Comments rolled in. "Gross. Homewrecker. Who cheats with the dude?" His inbox filled with clients canceling gigs, friends asking what the hell was going on. By noon, his biggest account, a Brentwood remodel, dumped him via email. "We can't associate with this drama," it read. Abby's stomach twisted. This wasn't just gossip, it was a guillotine. He tried calling Trey. Straight to voicemail. Texts bounced back unread. The guy had ghosted him, left him to drown in the mess they'd made together. Abby paced his Santa Monica apartment, the ocean breeze mocking him through the open window. He'd known it was risky, letting Trey in, but he hadn't expected this, a public gutting that torched his career and his name. The worst part? He couldn't even hate Trey. Not fully. Those nights, the heat of Trey's hands, the way his laugh softened in the dark, still burned in his chest, even as the world turned on him. Days blurred into a haze. Abby stopped checking his phone. The notifications were a buzzsaw he couldn't face. He holed up, blinds drawn, sketching half-baked ideas he'd never pitch. Sleep came in fits, haunted by Trey's last words. "I don't know who I am without her." It stung more than the Instagram post. Abby had been a fling, a glitch, nothing worth fighting for. He should have ended it sooner, should have seen the crash coming. But he'd wanted it, wanted him, and now he was paying the price. A week later he forced himself out. He needed air, coffee, something to shake the fog. Walking down Montana Avenue, he kept his head low, hoodie up, praying no one recognized the homewrecker from Caitlin's viral takedown. That's when he saw them. Across the street, at a trendy outdoor cafe, Trey sat with Caitlin. She was laughing, her hand draped over his, her blonde hair catching the sun. Trey looked fine. Not happy, not broken, just there. Abby froze, his breath catching. Then Trey's eyes flicked up, meeting his across the distance. For a split second, time stopped. No smirk, no wave, just a flash of something raw in Trey's gaze. Guilt? Regret? Abby couldn't tell. Then Caitlin said something, and Trey looked away, back to her, like Abby was a stranger. The moment gutted him. He turned, boots scuffing the pavement, and walked the other way. His chest ached, a dull, heavy thing he couldn't shake. Trey had gone back, chosen the life he knew, the one with Caitlin and the kid on the way. Abby got it. He wasn't the type you build a future with, not for a guy like Trey. But seeing them together, cracked something in him he hadn't known was fragile. He'd been a fool to think those nights meant anything more than a detour. Back home, he sank onto the couch, staring at the spot where Trey used to sprawl. The apartment felt too big, too quiet. He grabbed his phone, deleted the last text he'd sent Trey. "You okay? We need to talk," and blocked his number. It didn't fix the hole in his gut, but it was a start. Caitlin had won, sure, but Abby wasn't sure what she'd won, a guy who'd run the second things got messy. And Abby? He'd lost more than his rep. He'd lost the one person who'd ever made him feel like enough, even if it was a lie. The city hummed outside, indifferent. Abby leaned back, closing his eyes. He'd rebuild, new clients, new hustle. But Trey Cole? That was a scar he'd carry, whether he wanted to or not. 3100. Part 5, Shocking Return. Abby Sanders had spent 3 months clawing his way back from the edge. After Caitlin's Instagram takedown torched his reputation, he'd hit reset, new clients, a tighter circle, a wall around the part of him that still ached for Trey Cole. His Santa Monica apartment wasn't a sanctuary anymore, just a space he moved through, sketching designs and chasing deadlines. The city kept spinning, waves crashing, horns blaring, and Abby learned to tune out the noise, inside and out. Trey was gone. Blocked. A ghost he'd buried under late nights and black coffee. Life wasn't perfect, but it was his again. Then came the knock. It was a Thursday, past midnight, the kind of hour that promises trouble. Abby was sprawled on the couch, half watching a Netflix rerun, when the sharp rap jolted him upright. He froze, gut twisting. No one buzzed up that late, his friends texted, his clients emailed. Another knock, harder. He crossed the room, peering through the peephole, and his breath caught. Trey stood there, hair wild, eyes red, jacket slung over one shoulder like he'd walked straight out of a storm. Abby opened the door, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. "What the hell are you doing here?" His voice was steady, but his pulse wasn't. Trey looked wrecked, cheeks hollow, stubble rough, like he hadn't slept in days. "I had to see you," he said, voice raw. Abby's jaw tightened. "It's been 3 months, man. You don't get to just show up." Trey stepped closer, hands out like he was pleading. "I left her, Abby. Caitlin's gone. I'm done." The words hit like a shockwave. Abby blinked, stepping back, letting Trey in despite every instinct screaming to slam the door. "What do you mean, done?" he asked, shutting it behind him. Trey paced the living room, dragging a hand through his hair. "We're over. I moved out last week. I couldn't." He stopped, meeting Abby's eyes, and the desperation there was a punch to the gut. "I couldn't keep pretending. Not after you." Abby's chest tightened. He wanted to believe it, wanted to feel the rush of those words, but the scars were too fresh. "You went back to her," he said, voice low. "I saw you too, all cozy at that cafe. You picked her." Trey flinched, shaking his head. "I tried, man. I thought I could fix it, be the guy she needed, the dad. But every time I was with her, I kept seeing you." He stepped closer, voice dropping. "I messed up, Abby. I know that. But I'm here now." For a heartbeat, Abby almost cracked. Those nights, the heat, the pull, flooded back, tempting him to let Trey in again. But he held firm, nodding toward the couch. "Sit. Talk." Trey sank down, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "Ask me anything," he said. Abby leaned against the counter, arms still crossed. "The kid. What happened with that?" Trey's shoulders tensed, and the silence stretched too long. Then he looked up, eyes dark. "There was no kid." Abby's breath itched. "What?" Trey rubbed his face, exhaling hard. "She wasn't pregnant. She lied, said it to keep me. I found out a month ago. She admitted it, crying, begging me to stay anyway. But I was already gone." Abby's mind reeled. No kid. A lie. All that guilt, the wreckage, it had been built on nothing. "You told me she was pregnant," he said, voice rising. "You let me think you were starting a family while you were screwing me over." Trey stood, hands up. "I didn't know, Abby. She had me believing it too, until she slipped up. I swear." Anger flared, hot and sharp. Abby stepped forward, fists clenched. "You swear? You ran back to her, left me to rot while she trashed my life, and now you're here 'cause she's a liar? What am I to you, Trey? The backup plan?" Trey's face crumpled. "No. You're," he faltered, voice breaking. "You're the only thing that ever felt real." Abby laughed, bitter and cold. "Real enough to ditch when it got hard." Trey reached for him, but Abby pulled back. "Don't," he snapped. "You don't get to do this, waltz in, play the broken hero, and expect me to fix you. I'm done." Trey's eyes glistened, but he didn't argue. "I love you," he whispered, the words hanging heavy. Abby's throat burned, but he shook his head. You don't even know what that means. Get out. Trey stood there, a shadow of the guy Abby once knew, then nodded. The door clicked shut behind him, softer this time, final. Abby sank onto the couch, head in his hands. Love. What a joke. Trey hadn't just lied, he'd used him, twisted him into a lifeline he'd never earned. Abby wasn't his to break anymore. The city buzzed outside, indifferent, and for the first time, Abby let it all go, the hurt, the hope, the ghost of Trey Cole.